Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ustadha, how are you doing today?
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, doing well, happy to be here. Always good to see you, Hafsa.
Alhamdulillah. It's always too long of a gap in between sessions, alhamdulillah. But
It really is.
yeah. I was actually in France recently, and all I can think about when it comes to France is your mom being French. And I was like, I have to tell Ustadha Sarah. So I never messaged you, but alhamdulillah, it's nice to
Oh,
catch up live and to feel like
nice, nice. I hope you had a great time, inshallah.
I did, alhamdulillah. Now, before we jump into the talk, I know this has been a huge part of your mission as, it's almost kind of about your identity within the Islamic space is bringing in your professional background into this topic. I know we've done an entire course on Islamic mental health. Why did you feel like you needed to do a separate course on the topic of grounded specifically?
Well, Jazakallah khair. I think, grounded is unique because what it does, it allowed me the opportunity to delve really deeply into the stories from our history and all of the different historical figures, whether it was the prophets or the righteous women, the companions, just a lot of our righteous predecessors, and to realize that the psychological tools that we use a lot of times in Western therapy, we've had them and a lot better in our Islamic history, alhamdulillah, especially because it ties into our spirituality. And that's a void, as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah says, that can't be filled except with Allah. And we all have that void in our hearts. And so when we use those psychological tools, but in conjunction with what we truly need spiritually, it is so transformative. It's one thing to be aware of like psychology 101, kind of like the way our minds work and things like that, but the practical tools of how to navigate difficult circumstances, grief, anxiety, powerlessness, those are things that I think we really needed to delve into in terms of like how we can bring that into our lives. And that's what I was really hoping for with Grounded.
Beautiful. Jazakumullah khair for that. So, I mean, honestly, a lot of times when you're like being exposed to psychological content and therapists and all that kind of stuff online, there's always that like ding, 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 like Islam does this better. But sometimes we don't know how to translate it in terms that are, I guess, more specific to all the different scenarios and the experiences that people feel. And sometimes we don't even know how to take all the wealth of content and access that we have to, spiritual and psychological support through the Quran and the Sunnah, and actually make it relevant. And that's why it helps to have professionals like yourself who kind of like dumb it down and make it easy to understand and make it more connected and give us the kind of the backstory and the understanding behind the stories even in the Quran and the Sunnah. So very excited, inshallah, to start that journey with you for this topic. I know it's not going to be, we're not going to be able to do justice to all of it, but inshallah, I can't wait to dive into when faith feels distant, how to reconnect spiritually in difficult times. I'm going to pass it off to you. Bismillah, let's kick it off.
جزاك الله خير حفصة. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. So this topic, to reduce it to the amount of time that we have together, was very, very hard, and I'm going to try my best, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair to all of you for being here today. And just from a couple of the responses that I saw in the chat and just from, kind of our collective experience, a lot of you are likely tuning in because either you are going through something difficult right now, you've noticed the toll that it's taken on your sense of spiritual stability, maybe somebody that you care about is struggling in this way, or maybe just because you know that tests are inevitable to promise. We are guaranteed that we are going to be tested. And so you want to equip yourself with the ability to navigate these tests in a way that bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instead of further away, right? Because we all have different struggles. We all have different pain. We all have different tests. But one beautiful thing about every single one of you who's tuning in today is that you want these struggles to be a means of connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's our intention. If any of you have ever attended any of my talks before, always start with an intention so that every moment that you spend listening, every moment you spend engaging, and anything you take from today that you put into practice, you have an intention for it to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you're rewarded for every one of those moments. So my goal today is to give us practical tools that we can use to navigate difficult situations so that we can hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we need at all times, but especially during times of struggle. Because in moments of darkness, the only true light that we have is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is An-Nur, right? He is the light. And not just a light, He is An-Nur, the light, one of His beautiful names. And so when we can connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during difficulty, suddenly the darkness doesn't seem as lonely and it doesn't seem as dark because we have a light there. So that's our goal, and we're going to delve into some practical tools for that, inshallah. Now, before we go into the practical aspects, I want to give a little bit of background as to why sometimes we struggle with our faith and our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we're going through tests and trials. Why does that happen? Right? So, shaitan uses moments of vulnerability when we're struggling because he wants to encourage difficult thoughts that are going to lead us to question things in our lives, including our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you might find yourself or somebody that you know might even share these kinds of questions with you, like, why would Allah punish me like this? Does he hate me? It seems like whatever I do, how much I pray, nothing is changing. No matter how many dua I'm making, like, why do bad things keep happening to me? I've done everything right. I've tried to be like the perfect Muslim, but everything in my life is falling apart. So what's the point of even trying anymore? Or, people say that there's a good reason for everything, like that everything happens for a reason, but how can there possibly be a good reason for everything that I'm suffering through right now? So these thoughts, they can eat away at our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what's so hard about that is when you're already in a moment of darkness, it takes you further and further away from that light. And so you feel even more alone. When really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there for us and always has our back, whether we feel like that or not, right? And so one of the things I want to clarify with when these thoughts come up is that yes, this can like lead to feelings of distance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it can also lead to feelings of shame, which inadvertently take you further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There were some companions with Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that came to him, and this is a very powerful hadith, where they came to him and then they said, we find in ourselves thoughts that are too terrible to speak of. Like they couldn't even bring themselves to put it into words and to share it with Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he asked them, are you really experiencing thoughts like that? And likely some of these thoughts were blasphemous thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe some of the thoughts that I went through about like the thoughts that come up in your heart and your mind when you're going through struggles. And so he asked, are you really struggling with these thoughts? And they said, yes, we are. And he said, that is a clear sign of faith. The fact that you dislike those thoughts so much, the thoughts themselves have no bearing on your faith, but the fact that you dislike the thoughts are a sign of clear faith. And so I mentioned this hadith for two reasons. The first is to realize that you're not alone if you're struggling with thoughts like these, if you're struggling with difficult feelings about, your just faith in general, especially when you're going through hard times. You're not alone in that. You're actually in very good company in that the companions even struggled with these kinds of passing thoughts that would come through their minds and would really surprise them and worry them. And then number two is the fact that you're struggling, right? Keep in mind you're struggling. That word struggle means that you wish that you weren't going through that. You wish you weren't struggling with those thoughts. You wish you weren't feeling distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which shows a lot about you and your desire to connect with Allah. And like the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, it's a sign of clear faith that you want things to be different. And so hold on to that, right? Because a lot of times we view how like these moments of difficulty as what's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? Why am I not connecting with Allah during this time in the way that I know I want to, the way I know I should, right? And so what is happening in your brain in those moments? And I'm mentioning this because I think it's important to understand a little bit of the background. I'm not going to go into too much like science, but one thing to realize is that when things are stressful, there's a part of your brain that's responsible for survival. It's responsible for strong emotions like anger and fear and things like that. It's called the amygdala and it's in the back of your brain. That part of your brain turns on and it goes into overdrive. And so when this happens, our brain is trying to get us to survive through whatever situation we're going through. And so in those moments, when you're going through something hard, you might know, okay, if I pray, I'm probably going to feel a little bit better. I know making dua is going to make a difference here. I know reading Quran is something that's helpful during difficulties and it can bring comfort. But because your brain is in like stress response mode, it is guiding you away from that, right? So when your brain is in survival mode, it shuts down the front part of your brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, and that one is responsible for making good decisions. So when you're super, super stressed out, you might find that like you yell at somebody that you care about. You might find that you're like procrastinating a work deadline or a school deadline as it's approaching, even though you know it's not smart to do that. You might find that you're avoiding salah, you're avoiding acts of worship, even though logically you know that this could actually help. And one of the reasons why that's happening is because the decision-making part of your brain, that healthy decision-making part of your brain in the front of your brain is shut down. And so when you're going through difficulty, a lot of times your struggle to pray or to feel uplifted during prayer, your struggle to turn toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not always an indication of the state of your heart. Sometimes it's an indication of the state of your brain. And the reason why I mention that is because it can move us forward toward a solution instead of sitting in shame. Instead of just sitting there and feeling badly about ourselves and thinking, what's wrong with me and beating ourselves up, now we can think, okay, like now, how do I solve it? If I know it has to do with my brain, how can I deal with that? So, a few things to remember. The first is you are not yourself right now when you're going through abnormal events. You're going to tend to think and act abnormally. So when you're going through something that's not your norm, when you're going through something really hard, you're not going to quite be yourself. The next thing to keep in mind is that feelings move through us. So if you're experiencing intense emotions now, if you're feeling disconnected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right now, it doesn't mean that you're going to feel that way forever because feelings change. Emotions are transient. They are not permanent. They change. And then the other thing to be aware of is I want you to pay attention and catch yourself if you notice that you're using thoughts or you're noticing thoughts and statements going through your mind called should statements. Now, should statements are an unhealthy thought pattern that lead us to unrealistic expectations. So, an example is I shouldn't feel this way. So let's say you're going through something really hard, like I should be able to pull myself up by my bootstraps and get through this, and I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that. I shouldn't. I should, right? All of those things, whenever you hear the word should or shouldn't, a lot of times the next part of the sentence or the next part of the thought is an unrealistic standard because difficult emotions cannot just be turned off. It's not a switch. And it's like if you're in the middle of an argument with somebody or you're venting to somebody about something that you're going through and they're just like, just calm down, right? That never helps, right? You can't tell your brain, just calm down. It's not a switch that can be turned on and off. And if anybody has ever, this is like something very helpful for married couples. Just take that one out of your vocabulary. It never helps in the middle of an argument or when somebody's going through something difficult. That, like, people call it the C word. Calm down. It never helps. So let's take that one out of the vocabulary, right? Um, so when you can't stop the feelings that are going through you, right? And then you realize I can't fulfill the impossible of like I shouldn't feel this way, then sometimes you actually stop striving for what is possible because you've set up an unrealistic standard for yourself. So you just give up, right? And so keep in mind if those statements are coming up, we want to be able to change those should statements. Okay, so now let's walk into the solution. Okay, let's walk into the solution for, okay, when we feel distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously the solution is to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Much easier said than done. But one thing to realize is that when a person is going through a difficult experience, if somebody has gone through something traumatic, if somebody is going, if as we all are witnessing our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Sudan, in so many places of the world, when we're witnessing these tragedies, all of these different things, all of these traumatic experiences, in order to heal from difficulties, the antidote to that, the antidote to feeling frozen, to feeling panicked, to feeling isolated, to feeling stressed, overwhelmed, on edge, the antidote to that is to allow yourself to experience safety, mastery, meaning like, okay, I can do hard things, mastery, like I can get through things, feeling a sense of belonging, feeling a sense of safety, feeling a sense of empowerment, feeling like your needs are met, feeling at home. All of those are antidotes to those feelings that we get when we're stressed out, when we're going through difficult circumstances. And those are felt through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only stable source of those feelings. So that antidote, those feelings being the antidote, the one who is best able to give us those feelings is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And realize that all of our thoughts and emotions and behaviors are all intertwined. It's like a triangle. So the approach that we're going to go through in these practical tips is going to involve ways to manage behaviors, thoughts, and emotions to create overall change in the way that we connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first, we're going to go now through the practical tips. Okay. So the first is using our emotions wisely. Realize that our emotions are signals. They were created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to serve a purpose. It's what you do with the emotion that makes the difference. You can feel all the feelings. Feelings are there for a purpose. They tell you you need to pay attention. But what you do in response to those feelings is what makes a difference and what helps us either connect or disconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with emotion, and this is the only tip I'm going to give when it comes to like that triangle that I mentioned, behavior, emotion, and thoughts, all interconnected. This is the only tip I'm going to give about emotion because emotions are the hardest part to change because they come and go. You can't really control them, right? So it's what you do with the emotion. So this tip about emotion is to acknowledge the emotion, to say it out loud. This is a technique called name it to tame it. Right? Like when the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was feeling so overwhelmed, he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he said, I'm helpless, so help me. He named the emotion. And so when you say the emotion out loud to yourself, to somebody else, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it helps to make the emotion feel a little bit more manageable. It takes some of that power away from the emotion. Now, the next one is behavior change. Behavior change is really, really powerful, is really powerful. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that when you change your behavior, so for example, somebody who's really struggling with feeling down, feeling exhausted, feeling depressed, right? One of the actions that's encouraged is get up, get out of bed, go for a walk, move, just move a little bit, create some movement. And that will inevitably make you feel a little bit better, right? So changing things physically is very powerful. So when you can calm yourself down physically, the first tip for behavior change is something called grounding. Grounding helps you to calm down your body. And why is that really helpful? We talked about how the brain has an impact on the way you connect with Allah, right? That if your brain is in survival mode, you can't make healthy decisions with the front of your brain because the front of your brain is shut off. Calming your body down turns the front of your brain back on. It allows your brain to realize that I'm not in danger. Survival mode can turn off because there's nothing really dangerous happening here. I can actually, like, I can calm down, and you're not going to calm down your body if things are actually dangerous. So your brain now realizes you're safe, it's fine, you can think clearly again. So grounding is done by using your senses to bring yourself back to the present moment. Right. And this is something you can truthfully look up on YouTube, look up, like there's so many different grounding techniques, but one of my favorites is just to use your senses, right? So if you're going to use a sense of taste, for example, you're going to get a cup of water and you're going to take a sip of water. You're going to feel that water. You're going to feel the temperature of that water. You're going to feel it go down your throat, and you're going to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for nourishing you with that water. So when your mind is in overdrive, this grounding brings your focus to what's happening physically. It brings your focus back to the moment instead of letting you be trapped in those thoughts that are taking you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this can really break that negative cycle. All right. So that's the first behavior one. The second behavior one is something called behavioral activation. Now, this is where you just do something. Right? You just do one small thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not expect you to be perfect. The standards of perfection that we hold within ourselves are self-imposed. We expect ourselves to be perfect, but that's not what Allah expects of us, right? So even if you've been far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reminding yourself that you can always come back. You can always come back. And that when Allah promises us that when we come to Him walking, He comes to us running, right? So you take one small step until you ask yourself, what is one small thing that I can do for Allah right now? It can be logging into a webinar about connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It can be reading one verse of the Quran, just one. It can be turning on a YouTube video of the Quran and listening to it, reciting one dua, making wudu, right? Praying 2 rak'ahs, anything, any small thing that you feel like you can do, even astaghfirullah, saying alhamdulillah, finding one small thing to be grateful for, that's behavioral activation. Just do one thing. And a lot of times that one thing leads to the next thing, which leads to the next thing, which leads to the next, where you feel so much better and more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those are the behaviors. And so now finally we're going to do the thoughts. Ways to change, practical ways to change our thoughts to allow us to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we feel so disconnected with Him. So the first one is about differentiating, like building a little bit of awareness. So being aware, first of all, of the thoughts that are going through our minds. And when those thoughts are going through your mind, identify, is this healthy guilt or is this shame? Healthy guilt is holding yourself accountable, right? Identifying that, hey, the behavior I'm doing is something I'm not comfortable with, right? Like this is not aligned with who I am as a person. This is not aligned as who I believe myself to be as a Muslim. I'm going to hold myself accountable for the behavior. Like that behavior is not okay. It doesn't mean that you as a person are problematic, but that the behavior is problematic. And this is where the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said that when talking about sins, he said that consult your heart. Righteousness is that which your soul feels at ease with and your heart feels tranquil. And wrongdoing is that which wavers in the soul and it causes uneasiness in the heart, even though people have repeatedly given their opinion in its favor, right? So it's this feeling of unease that, hey, I'm not living my life in the way that I would like to live it. What are the behaviors? What are the actions that are getting in the way? Shame is a really intensely painful feeling of feeling like you are fundamentally flawed, that you are the problem, that basically that you view yourself as unworthy and deeply flawed, and that feeling takes you away from Allah because it doesn't make it feel worthwhile to even try because you view yourself as unredeemable. Right? So healthy guilt and shame are two different things. So for example, you might, if you have healthy guilt, it might sound like, I've been feeling really down lately because I've been struggling to pray. And I feel like that's taking a toll on my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm going to create a plan to start praying again. I'm going to pray 2 rak'ahs of forgiveness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right now to help me to move forward. Right? So you're identifying the problematic behavior. And by identifying that behavior, now you are moving forward. Shame is, I've been feeling so down lately that I've been struggling to pray. Allah probably hates me since I can't do anything right. I can't even keep up with simple things. I'm a worthless person. I'm a waste of space. So what's the point of even trying? Shame goes to such an extreme and it leads you to the point of not even trying, right? So healthy guilt is like a compass and it guides our heart back to the path that we want to be on. And shame, it tears that compass apart and it causes us to feel completely lost. So identify where your thoughts are and bring it to the healthy guilt so that you can create that change. Okay, now, so that's one thing. Another thing when it comes to thoughts is reframing the thought process, thinking about things in a different way so that your thoughts can be an avenue to bring you back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first way to reframe what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, that distance, is that this moment doesn't define your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That your brain might be struggling to process everything that's happening and everything that you're going through, But as it heals, your heart will heal too. And your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need to be based on the disconnect that you're feeling right now. You can choose to define your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on the closeness that you hope to strive toward. Okay, so that's one. Number two is realizing that one of my favorite du'as is Hasbi Allah, just Hasbi Allah, right? Allah is enough for me. Allah is sufficient for me. So Allah is enough for you, and He's given you what you need to overcome this challenge. You are perfectly equipped to deal with everything that you're facing because you were meant to face it. So your brain, your body, your heart can overcome these hurdles because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you resilient and strong, and He's not going to burden you beyond what you can handle because He's going to give you what you need in order to handle it. If He's chosen you to face this test, then you're guaranteed to have the ability to succeed through it. Number three, remember the moments when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought you through difficulties. One of the things I often recommend to my clients is to kind of create a list, especially as they go through something and as they have made it through the other side, create a list, a gratitude list, noticing I was here and now I'm here. And remember that like before you're able to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you actually have to remember the blessings that He sent you. Remember what He brought you through. You have experienced other things in your life that have been really, really hard. And you've gone through it. You've gotten through it. You're on the other side because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought you through it. So He's going to bring you through this one too, inshallah, right? So you make dua for that. The fourth is to remember truths. Now, this is one of my favorite techniques because during difficulties, shaitan uses our fears to sow damaging thoughts. Like he wants us to think damaging thoughts that are going to damage our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all the thoughts that are going to go through your mind are based on fear. Replace those thoughts with truths because what your brain is thinking is not true. Just because you think it doesn't make it true. And so changing the fear-based thoughts to truth-based thoughts, how do we do that? We go to the Quran. You can also go to Hadith, right? Go to the Quran and find a truth, find a verse that contradicts the fear-based thought. So if you're feeling completely alone, you're going to look at Surah Al-Duha and you're going to see ma wadda'aka wa ma qala, right? That your Lord has not abandoned you and He doesn't hate you, right? That it's going to challenge that fear-based thought. So many, and like these are exercises that in the course, actually, I do this exercise. It's one of my favorite parts of just going through some of the thoughts that you might be struggling with and countering it with a truth. And it's something I would encourage all of you to do, like go through the Quran, bookmark the ayahs that really stand out to you and challenge those negative thoughts with those ayat. Because our thoughts are not truths, but what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, those are truths. And then the final thought reframe, the fifth one, is to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. He sees every effort you're putting in. He sees every desire in your heart. Even if you can't make dua, like you can't put the dua into words, He sees the dua of your heart. He sees what your heart is needing, what it's asking for. He sees every bit of pain. He sees every bit of fear that you've been experiencing. And as you suffer through whatever you're going through, realize that He sees every bit of effort. He is ash-shakur, the one who appreciates. He doesn't need anything that we do for Him, but He still appreciates it, right? One of my favorite names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one who is the remover of fear. He's the one who is the giver of tranquility. He is the source of all peace and safety, and He's always going to be there whenever you're ready to turn to Him. And so know that through every loss, through every struggle, there's one that you're never going to lose, and that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the everlasting, He's the ever present, and He sees you. He sees what you're going through. And He sees every bit of effort that you're putting in to gain closeness to Him. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless each and every one of us with a relationship, a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is incredibly strong so that we're able to hold on to the rope of Allah during good times, during times of difficulty, and during everyday experiences. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our brothers and sisters who are suffering throughout the world and grant them peace and freedom and victory. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullah khair.
Ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair, Ustadha. SubhanAllah. So many incredible gems. And honestly, not only was that very practical, but I think the gentleness, the way that you reframed and redirected sometimes some very, I guess you could say, toxic energy that we can give to ourselves when we misstep or when we spiral into, struggling with something and then becoming distant from Allah in that process. That was so, so necessary. Because SubhanAllah, I was thinking of this, someone I know who, I remember they were going through something for a long period of time, like I think it was over a year. And I don't know if I was there. They've just said this story enough times that I feel like I was there. But they were saying, like, some people had come over and they were staying somewhere temporarily, and they were like, "Oh, it's time for salah. Like, which way is the qibla?" And they were like, "I didn't even know the qibla in my own house." Because I had been so distant, like it felt like, okay, I just stopped praying for a period of time, and it had been months and months and months, and I didn't even know where the qibla was. And this is someone who's very, like, mashallah, strong in their deen otherwise, very vocal, strong advocate, this and that. So it happens to the best of us. Sometimes people can feel like, okay, I'm a terrible Muslim, like nobody else goes through this. Like this is like Allah must hate me if I can go this far away from him and whatnot. So it's very important to hear it in this terminology, and then find, like, know that there's a way back. Sometimes it feels like, okay, khalas, it's too much to tackle all at once. These very practical, simple steps were just amazing to hear. I need to re-listen to it. I started note taking. I had to, like, lock in, and then I was like, okay, I got to lock out and then come back to this afterwards, inshallah. So I know there's some great questions that are going to be asked, and some, mashallah, some beautiful messages that I'm seeing here in the chat as well from people who are resonating, who are saying it was so beautiful and soothing and what they needed to hear. And then there's some questions coming in. So just reminding everybody here in the chat, the questions are in the Q&A box. So please submit them there so we don't lose them, because the chat will keep going and going and going. And please make sure that if you resonated with anything in this session and it spoke to you, we have a full course that I mentioned in the beginning that dives deeper into the emotional healing that comes from this connection between Islam and psychology. It's called Grounded, because everyone here should benefit. We want to make it accessible universally. We have made it pay what you can for the next 24 hours. So that way, it doesn't matter how much you can afford to give towards the cost of the course, inshallah, you will be able to access it. So make sure you go to almaghrib.online, follow the links that are dropped here in the chats, so that you can continue that journey, because there's so much more to be uncovered and so much more to be discussed. And there's so many great tools and specific examples and major challenges and stories that Ustadha Sarah has covered in that class that inshallah will be super relevant for you all. Yes, the link is dropped in the chat, but if you just go to almaghrib.online, you can inshallah find it. So some questions from you, Ustadha Sarah, actually even specifically in that scenario that I just shared. When somebody, and the salah, I think sometimes can be the first thing to go. I don't know if you hear this a lot from your experience, but what are the practical steps that you would recommend to somebody who has found themselves just not praying anymore, feeling that guilt, wanting to go back, but like feeling like this huge burden when they try to go back to salah? What would you recommend they do?
Yeah, I'm glad you actually gave me a chance to comment on that because it really touched me, subhanAllah, when you were sharing that story. You know, when it comes to salah, one of the things I've actually noticed, especially being in America, right? Like, so being in a Western country, is it usually, you're right, it absolutely is usually the first thing to fall off because it's not ingrained into our society and culture in the ways that it is in Muslim countries, right? And so it takes, like, you have to take time out of your day to connect with a part of yourself that's making you feel really guilty. And a lot of times, and especially in the culture that we grow up in, discomfort is something that we just don't know how to sit with, right? Like, we run away from any feeling of discomfort. And so if if salah itself is feeling uncomfortable, we're going to run away from it, right? So, but one thing when you mentioned that friend, one of the things that stood out to me in that story is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent those people, and those people were a reminder to her to like to come back, right? And a lot of times people look for signs. They're just like, I just want a sign. I just want a sign that Allah is listening to me, and then I'll, et cetera, et cetera. But so many times we see signs everywhere, but we're not wearing the lens of looking at signs, the signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually putting in front of us. We are expecting a sign that is exactly what we want. That's what we decide as a sign, is that when Allah responds to this dua, when I get what I want, that I'm going to view as a sign. But in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends us so many signs and so many opportunities, and this was one of them. She could have chosen to just have been like, it's this way, right? And save herself from that feeling of guilt or whatever it is, and then just go back to her regular life and not engage in salah. But instead, she took that as a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, hey, this was a wake-up call, and now I'm gonna start praying. So the first piece of advice in that is look for the signs that Allah, like, keep our eyes open for this, the wake-up calls that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending us, and don't close your eyes to those opportunities because those are gifts. When you feel guilt, that is a gift because it shows that your heart is alive. It shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to connect with him. Don't like that's a good thing. Guilt is a good feeling. Shame that takes you away from Allah, where you're just like, I'm the problem. I can't, nothing I do can ever change this. That's problematic. But guilt keeps your heart alive. And you have a chance to act on it and create change. And then the other thing is start somewhere. Just, like, okay, you might not be able to do 100%. Keep your goal 100% and start at 1%. 10%, 20%. Because a lot of times we look at things and we're like, if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. And that's a trick of shaitan. And that's what holds us back from Allah. It's what holds people back from going to Umrah. How many people have I had the conversations with where it's like, I'm not ready. I'm not in at the spiritual level where I deserve to be at Umrah. And I'm like, well, if Allah invites you to his house, then that's not on you to decide that you're not deserving of that, right? And so all of these different things, we hold ourselves to a standard of perfection, and that's a trick of shaitan. So start somewhere. Something is always better than nothing is a good motto to have.
Beautiful. Jazakumullah khair. That's a very practical tip. And I think definitely perfectionism is, especially, I don't know if it's just for women, though that's it's worse for us, where like if we are not really good at something or we can't do things to the standard that we used to be able to do them, we khalas, we don't want to touch it, Like this is a common theme I see quite a bit. And this is one of many themes I think, alhamdulillah, we covered very practical, very realistic, real life situations and very tough experiences, such as I know there's a story of someone experiencing cancer and some really like difficult, like grieving, heart, like life changing experiences that we tried to tackle and grounded so that you have a holistic approach to all the different types of struggles that you'll experience in life. So make sure that you guys, whoever's listening, inshallah, something's resonating, make sure you're checking out Maghrib.online. And that link has been dropped here in the chat as well. We're covering topics like loss and anxiety and emotional imbalance and all that kind of stuff. And as I mentioned before, it's lifetime access and pay what you can. So let's jump into this Q&A box as well. Yes, we'll keep reposting all that kind of stuff. Anyone who joined late, inshallah, you won't miss out. The first question that I see submitted in the Q&A box was, I feel really anxious while learning Islamic knowledge and the Quran about Allah. I feel fear more than hope. I have death anxiety for several months. What would you recommend they do?
Yeah. So having anxiety when you're learning about your faith, right? And I'm glad you mentioned the death anxiety piece because I think that sounds like it's very much intertwined with the anxiety that you're feeling. A lot of times when we connect with our faith, we are connecting with the idea of the hereafter. And the hereafter necessitates death, right? And so when you feel anxious about death, religion is going to be very anxiety provoking because you realize that you're not necessarily living this life for this life, at least not only for this life, you're living it for the next. And that requires embracing the idea and accepting the idea that this life is temporary. And if you experience death anxiety, then that can be very, very difficult to sit with. So the first thing I would say is, you know, kind of create like trying to create. So first, I would say it would be really helpful to talk to a therapist about this because death anxiety is very common, and it's something to work through because it's going to benefit you in this life and in the next life, inshallah. But one of the things to keep in mind, right, is that sitting with the discomfort little by little, right? So setting manageable goals for yourself. So for example, you might want to read a surah that doesn't have so much about the hereafter in it, right? So you might read a surah that has more of the verses about rulings. Right. So you're going to look at like, you can look for a list of surahs that were revealed in Medina, the Medina phase. And you can start there. You can start to read those verses just as a way to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in those moments without triggering that death anxiety. little by little, gradually exposing yourself to some of that discomfort. So starting again, then going on to the verses about Jannah, right? Because Jannah can be really soothing. So even if there's death anxiety, and Jannah is obviously, it necessitates death, but learning about Jannah can alleviate a little bit of that anxiety because it gives us something beautiful to look forward to, something beautiful to hope for, right? So sitting with that discomfort in that way. Another exercise that I often recommend to my clients who are struggling with death anxiety is to do breathing, right? So to do some deep breathing. And while you're doing that deep breathing, acknowledging that that breath and your life and every moment of your life is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So acknowledging that Allah is giving you everything that you need in that moment. And he continues to do that. And so using your breath and bringing your attention to that breath and reminding yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking care of me right now and I'm always in the hands and in the care of Allah can be something to help with that anxiety. Doing that before engaging in any act of worship. So I talked about grounding. Breath work can be a form of grounding. So doing some deep breathing and then doing an act of worship. And when that act of worship becomes anxiety provoking, if you feel your anxiety come up, again, breathe through it. What you want to do is you want to ground yourself in like physical safety, make yourself feel physically safe. So you want to look up grounding techniques. You want to look up anxiety management, physical anxiety management techniques. You can just look that up on Google and find what is going to be helpful and use those when you're doing an act of worship so that you break that association that your brain has created that worship is associated with anxiety. And so when you can break that association, it's going to get a lot easier to connect with Allah through that worship.
Beautiful, Jazakumullah khair for that thorough answer, Ustadha. I know there's a lot of great questions coming in. We're going to do our best with the little limited time that we have. I did notice as I'm going through them that a lot of these were answered a lot more in depth in the grounded class. That's why we've taken so much time to, professionally film and go through all the content and break it down for you all. So if there's something that we don't get a chance to properly touch on, I highly recommend, especially while it's for the next 24 hours, pay what you can to go through the class because you'll find a lot of these questions are going to be answered super, super well in that. Especially there's quite a few on anxiety around depressive thoughts, around these kind of fears and stuff like that. So I'm trying to find stuff that are like really, really well covered so that we have some variety.
There's a whole module on anxiety and fear.
Exactly.
So that one would be helpful for that, inshallah.
Exactly. The next question that I found was kind of interesting is I found that most helpful in changing negative thoughts during times of trial and perhaps the hardest thing to do at the time, and that was changing her diet. So someone just kind of explaining how they excluded seed oils, processed foods, GMOs, etc., and focusing on eating or whole foods. And they're just asking, have you noted that in your practice when consulting people that changing diets makes a more stable and level-headed person to get over the challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what I was talking about the brain, right? So your gut health and your overall physical health is connected to your brain health. And so what you will realize is that depending on what you are ingesting food-wise and also ingesting in like social media and things as a side note, right? Those are all intertwined. So a lot of times, if I have a client who's like, typically doing okay and everything, and then all of a sudden they come in and they're just like not themselves, one of the things I found is like after they've gotten sick and they've taken like antibiotics, for example, it kills the biome like in the gut, like your gut biome, like all the different bacterias, and it messes a little bit with that system. And that can affect your emotional health. Or if they're on a new routine, a new diet, a new whatever it is, a new supplement or something like that, being really aware of the way that that affects your emotions and your thoughts is really important. So yeah, they are intertwined and it's really our bodies are an amana. They're a responsibility when we take care of ourselves. Part of that is taking care of our physical health, and that impacts our mental and emotional health, which can also impact our spiritual health. So you can tie the intention to connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of those forms of self-care.
Beautiful. Very interesting topic. I feel like I could go down a rabbit hole right now, so I won't comment too much because this is like a podcast topic on itself, mashallah. But Jazakallah khair, I'm very interested to see that there's that strong connection there. Now, okay, of course, we've mentioned that we cover some heavy topics in this class. The next question is quite heavy. Someone is sharing that they lost their 2.5-year-old last year unexpectedly. And since then, they've been doing everything that they can to heal mentally and spiritually and physically. But what breaks them the most is not just the loss themselves itself, but the fact that it's really shaken their relationship with Allah. And they're just asking if there's anything that you can share that might help them find their way back, and something that would just help them strengthen their heart and reconnect with Him, whatever besides the tools that have already been shared so far today.
Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy on you, grant you peace and healing and solace as you navigate this loss and reunite you with your little one in the highest level of Jannah. That kind of loss, the loss of a child, is unlike any other loss. And the way that it impacts a person is unlike any other loss. So the first thing, I would say is definitely give yourself grace, right? Give yourself patience as you cope with this, because this is not something where, oh, in a year, like I'm going to be back to my normal self. That's not the way a person is, after any loss, a person is never going to be exactly the same as they were. And especially after a loss this traumatic, it is going to take a lot of recovery time. And so giving yourself that grace to realize that it's okay if it takes a while. And just like I said in the beginning of this talk, the fact that it bothers you that you're not feeling as connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is an indication of your heart. Not necessarily the struggle itself of I'm struggling to get up for salah, I'm struggling to make dua, I'm struggling with all of these different things. The indication that I'm hearing in terms of where your heart is that I wish I wasn't struggling with that. And that shows that you care. That shows that you care about your connection and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that, inshallah, is going to be the path that leads you to get closer and closer and closer to Him. One of the things that I think, what in the grief component of this course, one of the things that I talk about is something called habits of the heart. Habits of the heart is like, when if you've lost somebody, but this was the person that you used to speak to on your way when you would drive to a certain place, you would always pick up the phone and you would call this person, but now you can no longer call them. Or for you, when you see a particular corner of the house and you remember your child doing something in that corner, and that's a habit of the heart, meaning like your heart is habitually turning toward that person and trying to channel this love toward that person, but now that person is no longer there to receive the love. And you need to put that love somewhere. Like you can't just hold on to it because that's what breaks us, right? And so how do we now channel that habit of the heart? If possible, using those moments to connect with Allah, channeling that habit of the heart to become a habit of connecting your heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the smallest thing of, like, thank you, Allah, for giving me that moment with my child. Or astaghfirullah, like istighfar, it doesn't mean, it's not only for when we're sinful. It's not only for when we acknowledge a mistake that we make. Like we're promised that so much good is going to come from that it alleviates anxiety. It helps to alleviate the fog on our hearts, like the Rasul ﷺ said. So even just that moment of istighfar, the Prophet Yunus ﷺ was released from the belly of the whale, the darkness, 3 layers of darkness, and he was released from those layers of darkness when he made istighfar, right? So it's a means out. It's a means out of of giving us a way out of difficulty as well. So I would say that's just one small thing that maybe you can take with you, inshallah. But I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you peace and healing as you cope with such a difficult loss.
Ameen, ya Rabbi, ameen. That is, subhanAllah, such a challenging experience. And I actually wanted to quickly share, because Ustadha mentioned the module on anxiety. That's a huge part of this course, is actually grief and loss. And all of us are going to experience it at some point in time. So literally in the module 1 that we have for Grounded is how to navigate grief and loss. And I want to share this because, especially for those of you who have experienced it recently or are still in the throes of it, there's so many really practical lessons. There's a lesson on understanding grief, on experiencing the pain, on adjustments and realizations, on maintaining the bonds with the deceased loved one, some what Zala was touching on right now, the grief house exercise, so many other, so many like beneficial lessons that will help you slowly, step by step, tackle something that feels like insurmountable right now. And Allah make it easy for everyone who's experiencing it in whatever form or whatever way it's manifesting. So the next question, sorry, it's so hard not to do just like to sit with something so heavy and then try to do as much as we can. I know we only have a few questions left and a few minutes left to tackle them. So I'll try to put some variety in there. I know there's one question I saw. Someone was basically talking about how they felt disconnected to their salah. They have ADHD and just feeling that khushu, and they don't feel it unless there's something really chaotic happening in their life that they need to really focus in on. Otherwise, it's not enough for them to just stand in salah and feel connected to it. Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, so I would look into ADHD tools that help with focus outside of Salah. Use some of those same tools inside Salah, right? So as long as obviously you're not like you can't bring a fidget toy into Salah, for example, right? So something that's not going to be problematic in Salah. But one of the things that I think would be particularly helpful because you mentioned like chaos, right? So chaos is what is going to help you center during your salah. So basically, your brain wants some sort of new info, chaos. Basic in for ADHD can be fuel in a lot of ways, right? And so another part of ADHD is that getting new information, new input is where and this is helpful for everybody, whether you have ADHD or not, getting new information is going to help with your focus as well. So, what is one thing that I would really, really recommend for everybody, but especially in response to this question, is every so often challenge yourself to learn something new for your salah. So, there's for example, the course Sweetness of Salah or Secrets of Salah. Which one does Sheikh Ammar Shukri do? What's the name of that
Mindfulness
one?
in salah.
Say that one
Mindful,
more time.
mindfulness in salah.
Mindfulness in Salah, right? So these are some courses that Al Maghrib offers that go in depth into the different aspects of Salah, including the meaning behind like the different du'as that we make, the different like thinking when you're if you haven't looked into this, for example, one small example is Surah Al-Fatiha. Whenever you're reciting Surah Al-Fatiha in every rak'ah, every single verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding to. So if you go into your salah now with like this fresh knowledge, even if you go in with understanding the response of Allah to just one of those verses, right? And then the following like couple of days you find out the response of Allah for the second verse, that new information is going to make you more hyper aware during your salah. It's going to bring in that khushu', inshallah. So I would say just looking for those like little tidbits of new information to keep you plugged into your salah.
Beautiful. Jazakumullah khair for that thorough response. I'm trying to find, there's like so many good questions. I don't know what to make our final question. So instead of just, giving you like 0 seconds to respond to somebody right now, I just wanted to ask you, Sarah, like what's the reason why you think somebody listening right now, anybody, whether there's someone who feels like, oh, I'm not really struggling with mental health challenges. I was just curious to see how this topic would kind of pan out to someone's like, people who are sharing something intense loss or intense experience that they're going through, or just regular mental health day-to-day challenges like fear, like anxiety and depression. What would this course do for them?
So, one of the things that I think as I've grown and as I've learned, one of the things that stands out to me is learning through stories, learning through examples of people who have been through it, people who have been through things that we can't imagine, things we can imagine, and seeing how they did it, right? Learning from their example. Whether you're going through something right now or not, the guarantee is that we are going to go through something. That's the human condition. That's a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're going to be tested. And so equipping, if you're not going through a challenge now, I would actually say that this course might be even more important because it's going to equip you with the tools for when you do. And if you are going through a challenge right now, then you're going to go into that course and you're going to be able to take something tangible, something practical, something that you can do in that exact moment where you're going to be able to pause the video and you're going to be able to do that practical tip, that exercise, whatever it is, and inshallah feel a change, right? And so anything that brings you, that you intend to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that helps you to navigate trials in a way that will be a step toward Allah instead of away from Him, it's something that's going to be worthwhile for you, inshallah, because there's no such thing as just staying stagnant. We're always making a choice. And that choice is either going to be a choice that we see on our book of deeds on the Day of Judgment where we're thrilled about it, or a choice of regret where we wish we had done it. And so going into this course, looking for that tool, even if it's just one tool that you can take that's going to help you improve your consistency and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's something that inshallah can be worthwhile. And then please make dua for me if it is. So,
You and your family always. I like
yes.
that term tool. Like a lot of times we struggle and challenge is inevitable for us, but I find we prepare for something when it's starting. Like when we're in it, we're like, okay, now what do I do? How do I think about it? How do I, and by that point, khalas, you're already stretched thin mentally, emotionally, physically, etc. So equipping yourself with those tools of actually understanding, okay, that life is going to be up and down. It's gonna, I'm gonna ebb and flow in my relationship and my strength and my connection with Allah when I'm in a low point. And this is how I recognize it. This is how I take care of it. This is how I get out of it. That's what I've really enjoyed about this class and about the Inside Out class that you've taught as well, is, having access to that before it gets bad, like catching those signs, catching myself, and being able to also support others through that. A lot of times I may not be going through something, but a friend or a family member or someone really close to me is. And I have that level of awareness now, especially having access to a resource like this class, to be able to either just get them to take it as well so they understand it even better, or to be just when they're like saying something very dangerous or saying something really concerning, or like they're not able to pull themselves out, giving them those reminders and those tools that these classes have given us, subhanAllah, to be able to do that. And also that's a reminder to all of you guys, if you may not, everyone's kind of, struggle is inevitable, but if you may not feel like, okay, khalas, I'm not going through a heavy grief right now, but I know someone who just had a heavy loss, I know they're going to benefit from this. This is a great gift to give. It's a great thing to connect others with, and inshallah get that ajr as well.
Also, one thing I'll just mention as a little thing too for parents, even if you're not necessarily going through anything, every module has tips, practical tips to help your child when they're going through it, right? So if your child is also struggling with a loss, if your child is struggling with anxiety, I wanted to include those components because I feel like it's not addressed enough, and kids need these tools, and parents need these tools to be able to give them to their kids. So yes, there's particular sections of each module that are geared toward kids.
I love that. Very, very unique, alhamdulillah, approach through this course grounded. I hope that you guys benefited from this session and from this time with Ustadha Sarah. I don't know if you're aware, Ustadha, I just found out that we're doing a Q&A as well, inshallah, for the class. So
I did not even know. This is news to me.
There's so many good questions we need. Do we have a Q&A? And they're like, I'm pretty sure we have a Q&A. I'm like, okay, we have a Q&A.
Good. Good. I love doing Q&A. It's always nice to talk to people who are taking the course. So that'd be awesome, inshallah.
Inshallah ta'ala. So we look forward to seeing you in that part of the experience. Jazakumullah khair for being who you are and bring this immensely beneficial webinar to us, and for putting all that blood, sweat, and tears into the class. We look forward to benefiting from it, and inshallah sharing that benefit. Barakallah feek. Inshallah, we'll see you very soon on the inside of the course.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for having me, Hafsa, and for your beautiful input. MashaAllah. It's always so wonderful to see you.